Hello and welcome to Held in Our Hearts Baby Loss Podcast. We are an Edinburgh-based charity providing baby loss counselling and support for bereaved families. We are committed to ensuring that no family has to face their journey of loss alone, and we wanted to create this podcast to reach out and share stories, encouraging greater connection and understanding. Join us on our journey as we speak to a wide variety of guest speakers who have been personally affected by baby loss or who have been moved by it.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of our podcast. My name is Nicola and today I have the great pleasure of speaking to Mikey McLeod, Grant Christie and Pete Easterbrook. All 3 men are bereaved dads and have trained as befrienders for Held in Our Hearts. Today we discussed why they became befrienders, barriers to men's grief, and playing the role of provider and fixer. We chatted about preconceptions about how men grieve and cope and the challenges faced when you're both thrown into the loss of your baby and have to navigate this journey together. We also talk about the men's support group available through the charity. We talked about befriending, our WhatsApp support group, and also the football team. As always, if you or anyone you know has been affected by baby loss, please reach out to us www.heldinourhearts.org.uk or email info@heldinourhearts.org.uk. So now, let me introduce our dads.
So welcome to our third podcast. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Grant and Pete and Mikey, who are all our volunteer male befrienders. So maybe a good part to start with would be what brought you into befriending, I guess.
Well, I'm happy to go first. I think for me, and I've sort of asked myself this question quite a few times, but I think for me, after we lost the twins, I think I had a sort of a certain energy, not even necessarily a really positive energy, but I felt like I needed to do something, and I think there's people express that in different ways. For some people it's running, for some people it's throwing themselves into a different activity, and I did that, but I just felt as though I wanted to do something. I needed to, there was some part of me where I wanted my experience not to be, entirely negative and all consuming. I wanted to try and kind of offset the negative parts of my experience, of our experience, by trying to give something positive to other people, I think, and trying to redress that balance a little bit, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense, actually, and it's what I've heard from lots of other befrienders, actually, this need to still give something back somehow, or that legacy of what happened. Yeah.
I think again, it's a similar idea. It's like, the charity helped us so much. You want to be part of that. But I think for me, it was very much the engagement and to be part of something. I think I initially found it a little bit difficult to necessarily sort of, Nicola, you spoke to me, direct sort of thing, but I probably found it a little bit difficult to sort of engage in that a bit further. But just being part of it through a slightly different way, whether it was, you're doing it through fundraising and then moving towards actually being a befriender, to talk to other people. It was as much for me as it was to help other people. I knew I'd get so much out of it. So I think it was that, just being part of this sort of amazing community that I didn't even know it existed, and I was really privileged to be part of.
Yeah, because you didn't come to all the support groups or was heavily involved necessarily. It was more quieter at the beginning.
Yeah, we found that hard to sort of step into that. It seemed a bit overwhelming. It wasn't something that we were used to, and I think it was an easier way to do it, through just sort of taking part in events almost, and then, like I said, the befriending sort of led on from there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear. What about yourself, Mikey?
Well, obviously the befriender thing, I don't know, it was just, it sort of, I said to Valerie, I said I'd like to be involved in the charity at some point. And then I had made contact with the charity, and then around about the same time that role sort of came out for the male befriender, and it just sort of came into one. But I always wanted to try and be part of the charity because I was always thankful for what they had done for myself and obviously my family in our time of need. You know what I mean? So I always felt that it was the right thing to do, was to try and give something back, and try and sort of, I don't know, help somebody along that is maybe facing similar or like worse circumstances. You know what I mean? Just to try and be a shoulder to cry on, or just to try and help somebody in any way. So it sort of fell into place, like the whole coming to Sands at the time. Obviously the name's changed now, but it felt like a bit of a calling, but I don't know. It just felt like the right thing to do. You know what I mean? And I'm glad it's happened now. I really am. I mean,
It's amazing that you all stepped up to that, because it was certainly something within Held Their Hearts that we felt was missing. So it's very women led often, grief, because I think we see it as the woman has carried the baby, then the woman has given birth to that baby, and maybe in society, stereotypically, we feel that then the woman expresses their grief in a more open and obvious way. But it was certainly something for myself over the years of really noticing men maybe coming to the first meeting as a couple and then sort of disappearing. And it was kind of like always that, but where are they? Obviously, I have a husband, so I knew his grief and how much he hid his and tried to almost hide from it. So it was almost like going, is this a pattern? Did it feel like a big thing to do? I guess I'm wondering like how you transitioned. When did you think, I feel I could cope with somebody else's grief?
I don't think. I mean, I don't know about Grant and Mikey. I don't remember there being a kind of a particular point. You know, when I sort of woke up one morning and thought, right, this is it. I think it was a kind of a gradual thing. I think. I mean, for me, it came sort of fairly early on, and I think it came back. Maybe actually, ironically, maybe for me initially, that was a sort of coping strategy. Maybe that was me saying, I need to do something, and focus on something and try and, I can't in any way undo or reverse what's happened. But if I'm putting my energies into something, I suppose, again, I guess it's different for all of us, but it was pretty daunting, pretty nerve wracking, because, I didn't know, you don't know how you're going to react. I mean, the training is brilliant, is really, really good, and sort of exposes you to that in a really safe way. But yeah, I mean, I remember being pretty daunted and worried about it. But again, at the same time, it's kind of like Grant's mentioned, it's a huge privilege, that people are, prepared and do open up and share things with you, such personal things and personal feelings. And it's a huge privilege and a responsibility. And, I take that really, really seriously. And it's something that's really important to me.
I think I was quite cautious about it. I mean, it took me, I think it was a good year after we lost the twins before I contacted Sands in the first place. And then even then, probably there was another couple of years after that before we sort of got more involved. And I think I wasn't sure how I was, like how I would be able to cope with helping somebody else. I think societally, it has changed. I think it's more acceptable for sort of men to talk and grieve more openly and not just cry at the football and stuff like that. So, but we maybe don't have as much practice, it's, if that makes any sense. So, my friends are still quite sort of stoic and, a bit reserved in that regard. So I didn't know what to expect. I think that was maybe it. So was I able and was I the right person, sort of thing, like so. And I think it was, as you spoke to more people, I remember speaking to Mikey, and then certainly when I went on the training, you began to realise it's just it's something we're all capable of. It's just just being kind. It's just listening. It's just, we're all able to do it. And it's something that I've really enjoyed. But yeah, it certainly seemed quite a big deal to start with. But it's been great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when people feel ready for it, because I'm not sure you ever go, right, I have grieved now, I am ready to support somebody else. I don't think it's as obvious as that. And maybe that's what puts people off becoming befrienders, is that, have I actually done enough of my own grief? Do I feel in a position? And I'm always interested to see why somebody then says, I think I could do this. I think I feel in a place. Maybe when you stop crying at football.
Never stop crying at the football.
Always crying at the football.
Maybe it just depends who you follow.
I think that's it.
That's for another day.
To change your football teams. Yeah, Mikey. And another area I guess I'm really interested in, I think probably anybody listening to this will probably be tuning in and really interested, male and female, is that difference. That was the bit that really fascinated me when we first started talking about the group. Mikey, I remember us having conversations initially, but almost is there a difference? And can you articulate that? Can you articulate as men how it feels to have had your precious baby die, and then how you and where you go with your grief? Is that something that we can discuss?
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's definitely something we can discuss. I think a lot of men, I think Pete and Grant will back me up, it doesn't really hit you straight away. You know something's bad has happened, but you're more watching your partner suffer, which is, you try to cope with that at the same time as obviously death hitting you in the face. But
yeah,
obviously when Freya passed for us, it was an outer body experience for me. I mean, and I never really started grieving until it was a good few weeks after. I mean, obviously because there was so much went on, I just didn't feel my head was in a place to sort of slow down, to take stock of what had actually happened.
Did it feel numb? I guess, was there a numbness around it?
I definitely felt, and this is, if anybody else was to say this to me, I'd be like, no. But now I understand it. It felt like an outer body experience that I could see what was happening. I just wasn't in control of it. Know what I mean? I didn't know how to control it. I didn't know how to make it better. I didn't know how to make my partner any less sad, or how to ease any pain. I mean, it was difficult, but it was definitely, for me personally, it definitely never. I knew something terrible had happened straight away, obviously because what had happened, but to actually take stock of it and start feeling the pain, it was a sort of delayed reaction. I was hurting for day one, but to really sort of sit down and think, wow, my life has changed forever now. I mean,
do you think, Mikey, we've spoken about this before, but do you think sometimes you kind of, and I think from speaking with guys in the group as well, you get this sense sometimes that the guys, you almost kind of go into that a different mode of, what is it I need to do? It's that kind of practical solutions that you try and find, in many cases, what is it? What can I actually do? And I think sometimes that kind of, it almost delays the grief a little bit, because and it totally rings true when you're talking about that numbness, but it's almost as if you sort of don't allow that grief to come to the front, because you've gone into that mode of, problem solving, which so many of us find ourselves in these difficult situations, is problem solving it. The difficulty, I think, comes in that really there is very little to solve, and that's when I think for lots of guys, and for myself included, that's when it really hits you, is that realization that I can't fix this. There are so many things, in life that I can, fix, and I can make things better, but I can't change this. And I think for me, that was when that numbness ended, and it suddenly came to the front, because I thought, I just can't change this. There's nothing I can do, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And do you think, even now in this day and age, do you think that is almost ingrained in men, like that primal kind of to protect and fix in a way?
I think there's it's probably less so these days, but there are still, I mean, our experience was a number of years ago, some 8 years ago sort of thing, when with Lucy and Darcy. But at the time, there was still guidance that, this is going to be really hard for your wife. You're going to need to look after her over the next wee while, and look after. We had Bobby, a wee boy, so there was still guidance in that, which is, sort of pushes you to the. It's still the mum that's lost the baby, and I think for me that was the bit I got really stuck. I didn't know I was allowed to grieve, because it wasn't particularly the stage it happened with us. Around 23 weeks, there was a whole sort of complications around. There's no death certificate. And it was just this. I didn't know what to do, and I think what was for me, and maybe this is a male thing, but I'm used to sort of knowing what to do. I'm used to, or having to, like you say, to fix things, to sort of, right, well, that's it, I'll just sort of plough on and get it. But what I found was that there was no guidance for this, because with most things in life, you end up with a sort of a group of friends. Hopefully you've got people that you rely on, sort of thing. So, for example, if you lost your job, or even, God forbid, like a parent dies or something, you've got people around you who you think, well, they've probably experienced that. There's somebody I can talk to. This was something that I didn't even know happened. When this happened to us, I didn't even know it was a possibility, because we'd had a baby and we were going to have another baby. We were going to have twins. So I had absolutely no reference point and nobody to talk to. And so I think I just got absolutely stuck with it. And potentially a lot of people acknowledged, to Sandy, the loss, but nobody seemed it wasn't as obvious or as easy maybe for people to come to me. And so therefore I just got a bit stuck. I was very lucky because I had lots of amazing friends. But I think the default is still to maybe to follow for the mum, and it's not taking one away from the other, but you sometimes feel a little bit on the outside. I think not intentionally, but just through habit.
I think you've touched something. Yeah, you've really touched on something that we hear all the time, is that all the men seem to be asked, like, how's your wife? How is she doing? It tends to always resort to that, is it not? Sometimes,
but do you not
safer?
think maybe that starts right at the beginning of a pregnancy? So throughout pregnancy, the man is seen as it's not an equal partnership, and in a way, quite rightly, because it's it's the female that is carrying the baby. They're kind of doing the hard work, and so it's not seen as an equal partnership in that sense. And so when a couple lose a baby or babies, that just carries on. So it's still that that imbalance between the two, between the couple. And you're absolutely right, Nick. I mean, that's what and I think even in my own experience, and speaking to guys that are in the group, they're asked, how is she doing? But nobody ever says, how are you doing? How are you? And I think that comes, as I say, right from the start, from pregnancy, because of the way that is.
Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting, because how does it feel then if somebody does say, and how are you? Because I know we've had discussions around this. The very first time that we met Mikey with the first group, there was really interesting chat around that, about the permission and who you feel you can feel confident to actually properly go there without almost feeling then it becomes about you. Is that not right? That for a man that feels quite complicated. At what point can you say, oh, these are my needs and I want them to be
absolutely
heard?
I think it's definitely when it comes to grieving for losing a child or children, it's the elephant in the room, because they might say, oh, how are you? But the man might turn around and say, well, I'm okay. But really they're breaking inside. But you don't want to upset your partner at that time, because obviously when you're grieving, there's so many emotions flying back and forward from male to female, know what I mean? So your partner may well be at a different stage from where you are. But personally, I just felt, and this is absolutely no criticism towards my partner at all, I felt there was things I couldn't say because it would upset her. Now, I've heard that from a number of different gentlemen that have told me that they feel it's better just to suffer in silence than cause World War III. You know what I mean? And sort of make things worse in a sense, and make the journey even harder. But I think that's one thing that I always try and tell guys when I meet them. I say, look, if I can tell you one piece of information, it's that this is not going to be easy. This is probably going to be maybe the most hardest time in your life to date, maybe even for your whole life. But try and be kind with each other. I mean, try and be gentle with each other, because nobody really tells you that. You know what I mean? That, look, you're going to feel different emotions on different days, and you might have good days and bad days. But you another thing as well. I know me and Pete have spoke about this. You sometimes feel wrong for smiling at certain times, and sort of getting on a pathway where you're a bit, and that purely because you don't want to upset your partner, or you feel guilty. You know what I mean? But I think from a lot of the men that we speak to, it's a case of they feel comfortable around us because we've lived it. You know what I mean? We've been there in similar circumstances, so they feel comfortable speaking in front of other men in the group and at the football and stuff like that. But generally, the feel you get is if you were to maybe say in front of your partner you were hurting, or an emotion, depending on where you are in grief, the pendulum could swing, and it may not be a sort of amicable outcome. You know what I mean? It could be a bit of a fire starter in some households. You know what I mean? Because obviously women deal with things differently from men. We know that, but it's definitely a big issue. You know what I mean? It's definitely a burning issue that we always hear.
I was really struck by that the first time that we met. When we met with, it was in Edinburgh, wasn't it? It's like we decided in a pub because that was neutral, and just it was like the most eye-opening experience for me, because what I don't know if the others can relate to this, Pete and Grant, but like what the guys spoke about was they felt guilty speaking to the partner about their own needs, because it kind of felt like, when do you do that? When do they look like that's okay for me to then broach? Oh, like this is how I feel, when they clearly look very broken and like struggling. When do they go to their own family? Because again, does it feel quite needy? And then equally with friends, it felt like that didn't seem, because with the friends, it felt like you just wanted to be yourself with your pals. So you wanted to just be like, go out for a drink, watch the football, go and do your, like, I'm being very stereotypical about male stuff, but, not let's have a coffee and chat about how I feel. So it was almost like I was really surprised that it felt like, for me looking at you all, going, I didn't really go anywhere until I find somebody that really understands it, which is really only another bereaved man. Does that kind of feel like something that you have experienced as well?
I think what's so unique about this experience is that, like, I mean, you've got a partner sort of thing who are often, it's like that's your best friend. So if there's any bad things in your life, you rely on them and they rely on you. And I think this is, well, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure there's other, but this is the only one I can think of where you're both broken at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're totally, like as Mikey says, you're totally worried about making it worse for that other person, because you've set your life to make things better for that person. So it's this responsibility, but at the same time you're also guided by them, particularly where it is, as Pete, you were saying, it's like, as a man you can't, and this is the wrong way of putting it, but it sometimes feels like a bit of you can't compete with the responsibility that the woman has had, like their body, they were actually nurturing, looking after this baby. So how they're dealing with it guides you. You can't possibly be more upset than maybe, they might not want to talk about it at that moment in time. So if they're not wanting to talk about it, then you can't possibly talk about it, because, why are you making this bigger than it is, sort of thing. So there's this, I think there's this whole mixture of things of trying to work out and like you say, prioritize your own sort of worries. And there is just this, I think it is such a unique experience that you don't really feel, unless you meet somebody within this group, you don't know anyone else has gone through it. You really feel it's just you that this has happened to. I think it's certainly what I found.
I think as well, I mean, I've, thinking about the number of times that guys have said, either, one-to-one or particularly in the group, they'll start a sentence or start a story or start to say something and preface it with, I would never say this to my partner, or I've never said this to my partner, but,
yeah.
And, to me, I mean, I think that's incredible that there's, that there's that space there where actually they feel like they can say something that they perhaps, wouldn't feel comfortable or would be reluctant to say to their partner for all those reasons that we've just discussed. But I think that in itself speaks volumes, that there are things, or there are, particular times when you just don't feel like you can talk to your partner because, like you say, Grant, you just don't, and Mikey, you don't really know exactly where they're at. And it's not this, it's really difficult because, you're right, whilst it's this uniquely shared experience that only the two of you truly understand, no matter how many times, you tell the story or, to friends and family, it really still is only the two of you that absolutely understand what you've been through. But the difficulty with that is that every time you look at that person and you talk to that person, that is a reminder in itself of what happened. And I think that's why we see, so many, and you said it earlier on, Mikey, that, the issues that come often with relationships are born out of that, because it's very difficult. It's just like a terrible irony that really the one person that, understands it completely is also the same person that, you look at and that reminds you of that grief. And it's the two things almost competing, if that makes sense. And I think that's what a lot of couples find really, really, really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear that what you've touched on is that you're both in it together. And certainly when we're doing training with midwives, it's trying to get people to understand that at no point in your life do you grow up and turn to your partner when you're pregnant or any point in your relationship and go, do you think if our child died, we would have a burial or a cremation? Or do you think we would sing this piece of music? Or do you think we would do this? So not only are you thrown into something relatively young, the worst thing I believe that could ever happen to you jointly is to lose your own. I mean, there's nothing in life, is there, that compares to that. It's the most primal thing we have, is to protect our young, and to be thrown into it together. But you're also, some of you have only just not long met, and we're all got different circumstances. But I've heard of people that have only known each other potentially some months, and they then have this excitement and joy of a baby together, but then this most devastating grief, but they're both in it. So you can't, it's like this, who turns to who? And I think, like you've all touched on, it's that classic not wanting to upset the partner who has just laboured a baby and is most likely grieving in a very open way. And so you just sort of almost like stifle it down a little bit, don't you? And then before you know it, it's years and years later, and you think, have I really ever sat down, just me, myself and I, and really grieved for this baby or babies that are in my life? We've had quite a lot of men come forward during COVID from longer ago. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, where you've had a lot of men saying, I thought I was doing okay, but I don't think I am. And we're talking a good sort of 5, 10, 15 years later. Does that make sense to you? Can you understand that?
I get that totally. And I think that's, I don't know, the guys might have a different view on it, but I think part of that is because, what COVID or what the pandemic has done is strip away all the structures and the things that we have around us, in society. It's all our, our patterns of life, the things that we do, the places that we visit, the way we do things, what we do on a weekday and a weekend, all these structures that we have around us, it's kind of stripped away. And I think for a lot of us, we rely on that structure to get us through, every day. We rely on that familiarity and that comfort and the reassurance that comes from, patterns of behavior. When all of that has gone, I think it can leave people feeling really bare and as though they've got nothing. There's no anchor in their life. All that familiarity and safety has suddenly gone, and it just exposes them and emotionally and mentally to things that happened, as you say, Nicola, often quite a long time ago, and it sort of comes to the surface because there's nothing there, that it's just laid bare, basically.
That's really interesting to hear.
I think it's maybe also one of, that's exactly it. It's like you've lost your support network, that you didn't even know was there sometimes. And maybe this is a male thing, but I'm less likely to go for if I ask my mates to go for a walk in the forest sort of thing, like, they'll sort of look at me a bit bemused. So, it's like I would go to the football and we wouldn't watch the football, but we go to catch up, to have a chat sort of thing. I think it's just as, yeah, well, yeah,
Aye.
often, like, but like the thing with the dad's group, the five-a-side and stuff like that, it's like these events, they're important. You know what I mean? It's like it's an easier focal point, I think, for certainly for me. It takes those events where we're less likely, as I say, to just sort of meet up for a chat sort of thing. And maybe that's one of the positives about lockdown, is that sort of changing a little bit. But we would need an event almost to meet up sort of thing. Something to do. We rarely sort of pick up the phone just for a blether and stuff like that. So it's there's definitely just lost all the normal things that we did, that have just made things harder.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Mikey, as well? Like people come longer ago?
I think Pete pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think the last couple of months has gave people a lot of time to think. I mean, a lot of time to reevaluate their position. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's gave people time to think about obviously the hurt that really went before. Know what I mean? Like I said before about people know the grief not really catching up with them at that point in time. Maybe when you're locked away for so long and you've got too much time as it's been, maybe that's sort of going to come back to haunt you. You know what I mean? I mean, that's one thing as well that I think me and Pete have definitely spoke about this. I think Grant, I'm sure Grant's mentioned it as well, is if you don't sort of confront the grief head on and try and deal with it, it will come back to meet you at some point. You know what I mean? In some shape or form, it definitely will creep up on you.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe what's happened. You know what I mean? That's maybe for some people, that's maybe been the case.
I think that's really interesting, Mikey, because I think some of the messages and emails that we've received from men tends to be either that I'm not doing so well now, as in more it feels like it's sliding into sort of more mental health, or perhaps it's like a partner saying I'm really worried now, and they're getting their own support, and then they start looking at their partner and thinking, I think you need some of this. It's like I think we're more accepting of support. For certainly, I mean, last year we had 257, I think, men have counselling sessions. Now, when I first started, I think you were lucky if there was about 50 in a year. It's like, I mean, that's really increased the numbers, but we've really seen it this year, this increase in men. And I guess that leads us nicely into maybe then talking about what we're doing as a charity in Held in Our Hearts, like what we're doing for men. Like, Mikey, you have been instrumental in this journey, and right from the start, you were keen, we met, and you were keen to take that on. So I don't know if you can tell us about the journey from very first meeting to where we're at now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
obviously, that, like you say, we met in that that sort of pub back then. I'm trying to remember where it was. It's not important, but
corner of Edinburgh. It was the domino effect, wasn't
it? We met in that pub, and I think we had 4 or 5 guys that night. And we sort of had a brief chat, and we weren't really sure where it was going to go after that. You know what I mean? Like it was I don't know, sort of in a bit of a lull. I mean, not really knowing what was happening, but after that, we tried to pick it up. But there was a period of time where it took a while to get going. Not I mean, it took a while to get the scheduled meets going. But obviously, we managed to get a few more meets under the belt, and then Pete came along, and then Grant done the training as well. And it's I don't know, it's actually been longer than I actually remember. You know what I mean? So obviously we had a few guys come in and they wanted to meet up at different occasions, and then we came up with the idea of Tracy was trying to float the idea of the running and stuff like that, and we were trying to get that off the ground, and then we managed to get the football, and that was a massive hit. But then also we had the 10K in between that as well, where a good few of the dads ran the 10K.
That's right. That was brilliant.
I think Pete's back is still sore for carrying me around that day, but it was a great day. It was a great day. You know what I mean?
We've got plenty of photos. Yeah, I've got plenty of photos.
Do you know the thing is I was actually running that slow that Pete was able to read me texts from Wendy at the same time. That's how slow I was running. I mean,
When was Wendy encouraging someone else's
She was.
husband? Yeah.
She was just getting worried because it was getting dark.
Even
It was quite a cold day. I do remember us being in the stadium, maybe like, where are they? Come on, lads.
my
Yeah.
kids actually said to Valerie, have we missed them? No, I mean, so there was that, but there's been a good few highlights. Not, I mean, obviously, like, I mean, it's a real shame we've got like close to 40 dads in the chat. So it just shows you. Yeah, obviously getting the WhatsApp off the ground as well was a big sort of thing for us. But I think that's sort of moving with the times. You know what I mean? In terms of people are always on their phones just now. So
yeah, that was a really big move, though. Was the WhatsApp? I think for me, look, I'm not on it, and I deliberately haven't on it because it's like, you know, I don't need to be on the dad stuff. But you know, I understand it's busy, and you know, it feels like people do access.
But I think it was. I mean, Mikey, you and I spoke about, or we always speak about this, but about making, you know, access for men, about making it accessible, you know, to everyone. So we, you know, we can't, you know, much as we'd love to have a, you know, something for everyone. I mean, that, you know, that's just impossible. But we should aspire to, you know, make support for men as accessible as possible. And that was kind of where the football was born out of, I think, you know, for people that, you know, find that, you know, sport and football in particular, you know, as a really positive way to meet other people and to, I suppose, in itself get support. But the WhatsApp group as well, because we, you know, there were so many guys that had said, and actually we, you know, we ran a bit of a survey with a group of guys, and so many of them said, I will never go to any kind of formal structured counselling or support. The thought of it was just too much, I think. And so I think that's right, isn't it, Mikey? That's kind of where the WhatsApp group started, as a way that it really lent itself to creating an environment where people could be as active or as passive as they wanted to be. You know, they could be present and read what, you know, what was happening and what people were saying, but without the same feelings that come from being in a room of people. You know, and they could just either observe, as I say, or take part. And that seems to have been a key part of it, really, I think. You know, where it's come from.
For sure.
I think for me, it's what held in our hearts offer is the variety. So, you know, we've spoken about how men and women grieve differently, but it's, you know, what we realise is that, you know, we all grieve differently. You know, it's like you said before, it's like the only other person who can really know how you feel, or as close to how you feel, as your partner. So, you know, it's offering lots of different ways. You know, so like you said, I wasn't big on going along to group meetings. I'm relatively quiet with the sort of WhatsApp group, but I like knowing it's there. I really enjoy the you know, when there's running events or there's fundraising and stuff like that, or there's you know, like there's the church service. It's all these different things, so it fits. You know, it's not just the sort of the men and women. It's within those groups. There's lots of different things, and it can allow you to be as fit your personality, so you can be as loud or as quiet as you want to be, and you'll find something that you know, that suits you. But it's just knowing that it's there, that there's other people there who have some idea, because I think, again, that's the bit that it isn't as obvious in society necessarily within your group of friends that somebody maybe has been through this, because it's not something talked about as openly. So it's brilliant.
Yeah. That's great. I think what you've touched on is really important, isn't it? Is that there isn't a one size fits for men or women. And, you know, that's really what we aim to achieve in the charity, is like, yeah, do you want to kick a ball about with other men that are bereaved? You don't have to talk about your loss, but you can get out, be physical, you know they're there. Or do you want to talk about it? Do you want a one-to-one with a befriender? Do you want to talk to a woman about that? Or do you want to talk to a man about that? You know, is it counselling you need? Do you need to speak to your befriender about that? Is it that we've got a conference coming up, and I know, like, Grant, you've spoken a couple of times at really big events and shared your story because it's about, in a room full of professional midwives who predominantly, it's probably 99% of conferences with 200 odd people are women when it comes to baby loss and grief. And it's really important that we crack through that and go, but where are the men? Where's the voice of the man here? Because there's equally grieving for their baby, albeit it might look different. There is equal grief there. So it's great to hear that you feel that. It's certainly our aim is that you come in and there's not you need to do it this way, and if you don't, then you can't partake. Or if you're not into football, well then I don't know what we're going to do. It's about making sure anyone can be part of, and how and when they want to. It might be years after, it might be dabbling.
And actually, that's worked. I think that's a really positive thing, because we have, we've got, it's a whole spectrum, of guys that are in that group. Some who've, had a bereavement really, really recently, weeks or sometimes even less, and others, who lost their baby or their babies years and years ago. But actually, I think that's, that kind of diversity in the experiences is really good. And particularly, I've found it even personally, when I speak to a dad who, had a loss a decade ago, I don't know how I'll feel in a decade. I don't know what, things will be like for me personally in a decade's time or even longer. So it's amazing to have an opportunity to speak to someone who's, been through, the particulars of our experiences are obviously different, but the outcome is sadly the same for all of us. And so to be able to speak to someone and hear, someone else talking who has that perspective, to be able to look back over such a long period of time, and, we get, I think, well, I get it, and I think guys in the group get that real benefit as well. So it's, it's great that the charity offers that. It's quite unique, I think, that, that's there.
And do you know what that's exactly it, Pete. Do you know what the WhatsApp group's like? It's almost like a wiki page for questions that you can't ask. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you look at the topics that come up through it, it's just things that you can't ask because you feel that you're meant to know or something. It's like, well, how did you have a funeral? What do you do at Christmas? What happens when you have problems with your partner? It's just everything. And it's just easy because it's not in a meeting where we might be a little bit embarrassed about it, but you can take it further. You've got that contact if you need to take it further, but it's quite amazing when you see all the different things that are covered in this WhatsApp group, which can sound quite trivial, but it's quite an amazing resource.
I think you're bang on, Grant. I think you what you say there is so many things that you're not going to hear at a group meeting. I mean, guys, you're not going to speak of that at a group meeting, but sometimes guys just need to vent, and it's not face to face. It's they can send a message and then step back and watch what the replies may or may not be. Know what I mean? And they can sort of gauge it from there. But that's a great way to put it. Know what I mean? Because yourself, some of the topics we've had of late, you've just been like, wow, I've never heard of that. Know what I mean? That like wow. And I'm so glad that there's guys here who can answer that and can help. Know what I mean? It's like a small community. That is united by grief, unfortunately. You know what I mean? But it's just like there's always someone there. You know what I mean? Whether it's 10 hours later or 10 minutes later, someone's always going to get back to you. You know what I mean?
Someone to validate what you're feeling.
I think just even right from the start, it never has been. But it, I think one of the reasons it works so well is because it's so there's no judgment. There's no. Nobody has an angle on it, and that's why it works. Because even when you talk to friends and when you talk to family, they've got an angle on the situation, and I don't mean that always in a negative way, but just because of their relationship with you. If it's your mum, your dad, your auntie, your uncle, your best friend, whoever it is, they're coming at it from that perspective. Whereas within the group, it's almost absolute equality. Everybody is is on that kind of same level as everybody else. So whatever advice or information or questions that people pose, it makes it so an environment that is totally non-judgmental, and and I think that gives guys a lot of comfort and confidence to be able to ask or say whatever they want in a we talk about a safe space, but it truly is a safe space.
Yeah, it's brilliant to hear, isn't it? I'm sure if any men are listening to that, that must feel almost soothing. Almost, I'm trying to think of what word, just to think of, gosh, there's a place that I could go and not be judged, and there's a place that I can go and ask these questions that I've got, but I don't know how to speak about them. And I guess touching on that, if there is any guys listening, or maybe partners that are concerned, I mean, is there advice? What would you say to somebody, whether they're new or longer ago? I guess somebody who's saying this might be something I need to speak about. Is there something you would? How would you lend a hand? I guess
personally, I mean, I've definitely spoke to Pete about this before, but it's almost as if like if the guys know what the women's group is like, or the mixed group, sorry, that's held or was held before we couldn't go. It's not really the same as that, but like we almost need like a camera to show guys that it's different, it's free, it's open, that there is no, the spotlight will never be on you. Know what I mean? It's more a case of come, speak if you want to speak. If you don't want to speak, absolutely fine. If you want to share, then brilliant. We'll listen, and we'll hopefully be able to help you some way along the way. But it's quite difficult to get across that. Look, this is completely non-judgmental. There is no obligation for you to do anything, even if you come to the five-a-sides and you just want to watch. Brilliant. Know what I mean? But me and Pete have definitely spoke about this. Sometimes guys look at the mixed group and they think, "Oh wow, I just don't know if I could have that spotlight on me." Know what I mean? That's not for me, that type of group. But that's a great group, by the way. So I'm not putting that down at all. I think that's an excellent service. I just think the men's one's handled slightly differently, but it's sometimes trying to put that into a message or a phone call to say, look, we sort of have we got a different pace. You know what I mean? And it's kind of handled differently, but it's really hard to try and get that across. But when guys come along, they see straight away that, like, wow, like this they were right. This is kind of different. Know what I mean? It's more suited towards men rather than couples. Know what I mean? So.
I think part of that, Mikey, and I'm thinking back to some of the the groups that we've had, and I think one of the reasons that it's worked quite well is because we haven't put in kind of rigid structures in place in terms of today we're going to talk about this, here's the agenda, guys, let's work our way through it. It's much more relaxed than that, and it's sort of dictated by how it kind of flows, and it is and sometimes some of the some really difficult, tough things come up, and guys sort of end up really bearing their soul, but you look back on it and you think, how on earth did we get here? Because there was no real direction. No one's been pushed in a particular place. It just sort of evolves naturally because it's a comfortable environment, with no pressure. And I think we're we're quite happy to let conversations drift off into other things and other areas, because that just adds to making people feel comfortable, and it works well.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's back to who we are as a charity. It's all about the people. It's person-centered. We don't have any processes, and this is how it works, and it goes through this channel, then this and this. And none of it is built on that. We build it on each individual family, and we organically grow around them, because we know that grief changes all the time, and we know everybody deals with it differently. And it sounds like what you're doing within the charity for men's grief is just phenomenal. And I, for one, am so grateful for your time and your compassion and what you provide. And I hope if anyone is listening, it might encourage someone to encourage a partner. But if you're a guy and listening, it might make you go, I might have a space in my life for that. Maybe I need to tap in with other people that get this part of me. There's many parts of us all, isn't there? But that part is a quite a deep hidden part for many men. And I'm sure there's people listening to this thinking it's not a place I go very often, but it might welcome them to be a bit more open. We always ask our guests at the end of our podcast if they can tell us something that they're grateful for. And I'm wondering if you could all share, just to finish us off, with something maybe that you feel grateful for. It might be today, or it might be in general.
Mine's just a simple one. Just particularly at the moment with COVID and lockdown and all that. Just my friends. I'm very fortunate that my friends will let me talk about anything, whether it's my girls, Darcy and Lucy, or whatever sort of thing. They're just a good bunch, sort of thing. I've got a great selection of friends, and I'm very lucky to have them.
That sounds brilliant. Who doesn't want that? Just like go to with anything.
I think for me, I mean, it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's true. I'm grateful for my family. Just my little family. And I think we've learned a lot more about each other over the last few months. We've spent a lot more time together. And I'm just, I think I feel very blessed and very lucky to have a family, that is supportive and understanding, and sort of helps me through life and forgives me when I do things wrong and praises me when I do things right. And I can't really ask for much more than that.
Yeah, for sure. For yourself, Mikey?
Probably much the same as the guys. I mean, I'm thankful for where I am in life today. It's been a terrible year for everybody, you know what I mean? So I'm thankful for where I am just now. I'm thankful for my family, all the support I've had. Also to the charity as well, for sort of backing us to be where we are on the men's side. You know what I mean? It's given us a real platform to help many men over the last few years. So I'm just thankful for the whole thing, to be honest. So yeah, thank you.
That's amazing to hear, but of course the thanks must come from me. You have used your grief of your children to go on and support others, and I hope, if anything, that anyone listening to this can hear that compassion and care in your voices. You do this voluntarily and give your time, and if there is anybody who's needing to speak to you, you've got three guys here. You can ask for anybody better to be supporting the charity and supporting those in their darkest hours. And as a charity, we're super, super grateful. And obviously for today, thank you ever so much. Thanks again.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks again to Mikey, Grant and Pete for talking so openly today and sharing their precious babies with us. I hope our conversations around men's grief and the complexities it brings resonated with many of you. Perhaps you're a bereaved dad yourself and thinking you would like to connect with others who understand. Or maybe you fancy joining the football team and getting together for a game. Perhaps you've been thinking about getting support yourself but wasn't sure how it would look. I hope today has helped you, and we're here for you if you want to talk or join any of our supports. To find out more, please visit www.heldinourhearts.org.uk or email info@heldinourhearts.org.uk. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.